the time to convince you I know anything about Beyonce. Well, I did not wake up like this. Hi everyone, my name is Alex, and this is my disorderly literary cult channel. And this might be the episode where I switch from disorderly to disordered in many people's eyes. It's my very first video though, so it's going south rather quickly. Because I will dare to say, I do not listen to Beyonce. Sorry, but I ain't sorry. So hear me out. I wanted to start a series to kick this channel off right, where I read favorite or recommended books of musicians I don't listen to or don't like. And if their literary taste convinces my picky rock and roll purist heart, then I will give them a listen. And if you want to know who it is that I don't listen to, well, essentially most popular music of today. I tried so hard to like it, but it seems as though most of the music that's most popular today that you hear everywhere just hurts my ears. Sorry. I'm sorry. I mean, when I was 16 years old, I very clearly developed a sensibility of a 50-year-old record store owner who doesn't listen to any music of the 21st century, with a few exceptions, and I kind of locked myself up within it. But I'm trying to open up my disorderly mind, expand my world, and all that, after living in willful isolation for much of society, even pre-COVID. And the best way to my heart is through literature. So, did Beyonce's reading list convince me? Well, you need to stick to the end to find out. So before I say anything else, although her genre or style of music may not be my cup of tea, aesthetically, musically, I do respect her tremendously. I think she's crazy talented, and her art has obviously had a huge cultural impact. That goes without saying. And who knows, maybe I will become a fan. How do you call Beyonce fans? I know every fan base has a name of its own. I'm not 100% sure if those are her favorite books of all time, but one of them she did mention directly, and others she referenced in her art. So I'm assuming she values them, and that's what I'm going to follow here.
I am angry. Gender as it functions today is a grave injustice. We should all be angry. Anger has a long history of bringing about positive change. But in addition to being angry, I'm also hopeful, because I believe deeply in the ability of human beings to make and remake themselves for the better.
In her song Flawless, Beyonce inserted a section of a TED Talk by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie called We Should All Be Feminists, which is a great talk. I will link it below, about her own experiences being and becoming a feminist, the day-to-day discrimination as well as systemic issues that many women still face today, both in the US and Nigeria, where she comes from. But I thought reading or watching the TED Talk was not enough. I wanted to really immerse myself in something deeply, and I just happened to own a paperback of her novel Americana, which was published around the same time as the TED Talk, so I read the book. So the novel is about two characters, Efemelu and Obinze, who fall in love but then need to separate because Efemelu goes to the US. What follows is an account of their lives as they try to assimilate Efemelu to the US, and Obinze eventually goes to the UK. Their struggles to find jobs, their relationships and friendships to other people, and stories of other immigrants. And I found that a really beautiful and immersive read. I know some people critiqued Adichie for making this a blatant social commentary without a proper plot or characters, but I didn't feel like that at all. I found the plot, the story, and the characters very engaging, and I loved reading both Adichie's insights into race and immigration and culture differences, as well as the characters' search for belonging and just wanting to make a home for themselves in the world and each other, and how being a person of color or a woman of color complicates that in different ways and in different places. So I said I wanted to find the links between the novel and the TED Talk, and there have been a few, particularly in the character of Kosi, who is described as someone always agreeable and modest and always choosing peace over truth. And Adichie did talk about that in the TED Talk, about how women are always expected to be likable and never argue and never speak their mind. There's also the narrative of Aunt Uja, who doesn't have any money of her own. She's technically in a relationship with a wealthy general, but anytime she needs something, she needs to ask him for the money. So she's never independent, and if something happens to him, then she's left all alone. So there is a thematic link between the TED Talk and the book, certainly. And I have no way of knowing if Beyonce actually read this book. I'm assuming maybe she did, but if she didn't, then I suppose I'm serving as an arbiter of literary taste for her here. But I definitely want to read more of Adichie's work, because I love the book.
The most disrespected person in America is the black woman. The most unprotected person in America is the black woman. The most neglected person in America is the black woman. And as
Beyonce used a part of Malcolm X's speech in her song Don't Hurt Yourself, where, by the way, she sampled Led Zeppelin's When the Levee Breaks, which was actually originally written by a black Delta blues artist. And it's interesting because I love Led Zeppelin, but this also reminded me how we often perceive rock as primarily white, even though it's not the case at all. Its roots aren't. Where he said that the most disrespected person in America is a black woman. And after reading the autobiography of Malcolm X, which again I'm not sure if Beyonce read, but she did use his speech, so I'm just following that trail. And that particular thing he said about women in America was a bit surprising to me because I really didn't like his depiction of women as he fought for equality and freedom for the black men. Women never seemed to be a part of that, not fully. Plus, he also had a tendency to judge a country's morals by the way the women were dressed. For example, he judged Lebanese women for being loose based on their dress, and then he said that the same goes for the country. So I don't think this should go unsaid, and I couldn't ignore that throughout the book. It just really bothered me. But regardless, it was still an insightful read. I knew about Malcolm X, of course, but never so up close. So I loved reading about his experiences as growing up a black man in America in poverty, and then being forced to, as he called it, hustle in order to survive. And then when he goes to prison, he educates himself there. And how tragic is that, as he mentions, the best way to get educated is to go to prison. It really shows how hard it is for so many people to find the time and space and resources to get educated, so they need to go to prison to do it. And of course he was talking about the period in the 1950s, but it's still pertinent today. And then he discovers Islam and begins to follow Elijah Muhammad, becomes a minister for him, until he is perceived as a threat and eventually gets killed. And I think among many other things, his story shows us the dangers of being misjudged, or more than that, the dangers of embodying a symbol of something. Malcolm X, for many people, became a symbol of hatred, as he seemingly hated white people, and many people back then did not try to look at it in more nuanced terms or get into an actual discourse with him. And then when he went to Mecca and discovered Islam outside of Elijah Muhammad, he saw things in a different way. He saw that we all need to come together as one, and he publicly said that he changed his mind. But it seemed as though it was too late for people to see him differently because he was a static symbol of something. He wasn't seen as a human being who was flawed and capable of change and growth. Whether we're talking famous people or change makers, activists, any public figure, it's very easy to see them in black and white. But anyway, we can definitely learn a lot from him about this sense of urgency and determination faced with important systemic issues we need to deal with. Sometimes being calm and patient is not enough. If we want to fight for something and feel like no one is listening, there often has to be someone or multiple people to shake things up, to cross a line before real change happens, to make people uncomfortable. And unfortunately, historically, it seems as though it often takes sacrifice to achieve that. But instead of seeing all anger as disordered or hateful, maybe we could try to find a way to use it for good. And there are so many things in the world today that we need to fight for, that we need this determination, this anger, this disorderliness of spirit, without hinging on hatred. Because Malcolm X was not a saint, and he admitted that he made a mistake by being hateful. And yet he is a symbol of that kind of personal transformation too. So even if we make lemonade out of lemons, there's still a sour undertaste to it, no matter how much sugar we put in. Because making change is not all sweet.
Everybody can play their part, see where they're drawn, what issue really concerns them or motivates them, and just realize we all can be an agent of change, and how positive and hopeful it is to be part of forward movements.
And what do you...
This is probably the only book on my list that Beyonce directly said she thinks every one of her fans should read. Or maybe my research is just not flawless. Sorry. It was a series with political figures, authors, and so on about women, leadership, power. The idea for it actually came from the writer's young daughter, who once asked her, "Why have we never had a woman president in the US?" Which made the author write this, because the answer surely is complex. And I did like the book. There were some interesting insights as for our approach to gender, the goals of feminism, the psychology beneath it all. I'm a sucker for anything psychological. But it was also written in 2013, so there wasn't that much very new to me personally. There were some interviews that I particularly enjoyed. For example, Don McPherson on men developing vulnerable masculinity, or Marianne Williamson on changing the paradigm of power, where we put humanitarian values before economic ones, or how we can use women's socialized nurturing tendencies to treat all Earth and people on Earth as our children and to take care of them, which is certainly needed in politics and in life today. Or Elizabeth Lesser on how women enter a political system that was not created by them, so it's natural that we feel strange and uncomfortable in it. A lot has changed since then, but maybe not as much as we would have wanted it to. It's kind of sad how everyone talked about expecting Hillary Clinton to become president in 2016, and yet we know what actually happened. At the same time, we really do need hope, especially now with the pandemic, the climate change, all the inequalities and tragedies happening on a daily basis. We need everyone to be included. And women's issues are just human issues, which is mentioned a lot in the book. But I will say that the book did not touch upon trans women a lot, which I think is something that should be included in a conversation about women's issues. I do think that this book might appeal to younger audiences more, potentially. It does get a bit repetitive at times, as many of them talk about the same issues, which are obviously all important. I think it would be great for teenagers and young adults, those who need to become more aware of gender inequalities, as well as for women to be motivated to become leaders themselves. At the same time, I do think everyone could take something out of it. Beyonce's right. If anything, it is a good reminder. It can give you new ways to articulate the issues still present today. I don't necessarily believe in the leader-follower binary, but I do know that over the years I've internalized this constant sense of inadequacy, submission, meekness, inferiority, and it's something I certainly need to work on at all times, so the book was a good reminder. So I also don't think we should pretend to be tough and masculine if we're not feeling that way. I think a part of being a good leader in life is being vulnerable and honest about how frustrated or disorderly you're feeling. So those are just my 2 cents on the subject.
Mother says there are locked rooms inside all women. Kitchen of lust, bedroom of grief, bathroom of apathy. Sometimes the men, they come with keys. Sometimes the men, they come with hammers.
Teaching My Mother How to Give Birth is a poetry collection by Warsan Shire, and Beyonce used many of her poems in her Lemonade film. And I did not read the entire collection. I couldn't buy it, I reached my book budget. But I did read some of them, and I don't feel qualified to talk about poetry. I know I'm a literature student, but I don't feel as connected to poetry as I do to prose. So I always feel intimidated in passing my judgment on it, as if it was not my place. But what did stand out to me in many of her poems is that constant, overwhelming sense of embodiment. In many of her poems, she comes back to this intimacy and claustrophobia of the body. Dress wet sticking to someone's stomach, or leather sticking to thighs. Half moon bitten into thighs, spreading legs. That sense of transgression and danger and threat of just existing in a woman's body, as if embodiment was always tarnished by something. Ghosts of abuse, of being exposed, used up, neglected. Those are frequent themes appearing in her poetry. Oppression against women, racism, a sense of displacement, the migrant experience. And though I didn't read the entire collection, there is that perpetual sense of threatened and threatening kind of intimacy, I would say. Though I do love that Beyonce used her poetry. I think it's amazing to see how she's using her power to lift up other Black women. And it's like the book on leadership mentioned many times. It's not about power over, but power to. It's about sharing the power you have. And I think Beyonce lifting those other voices up really exemplifies that. There are many other books I could have read here, because even Lemonade alone is full of explicit and implicit references to works of other Black women, but due to time constraints, I wanted to get it up on Beyonce's birthday. I only ended up reading those. I hope you got an idea of Beyonce's literary taste, which was good enough to make me listen to her music. And if you're looking for books that are certainly empowering, while also diversifying your reading list, which I know has become a bit of a loaded term and therefore quite vapid at times, but I think it's important. I do think it's worth exploring these books, because as a booktuber, I have to give my expert opinion. And in terms of music, I'll try to keep it short, though I don't know how to keep things short. Aesthetically, musically, emotionally, most of her albums are not my thing. However, I was very surprised, but I actually fell in love with Lemonade. It was a beautiful album. In contrast to her other albums, it seems much more versatile and grand and deep. And I really enjoyed it so much. I listened to it a few times. And honestly, I will admit, I have been pretty close-minded for a few years in terms of music, dismissing certain things out of a stupid, disordered principle. And I know that a lot of this, my rejection of things, stems from psychological damage that I want to explore right now. I turned feeling rejected in the world on its head and rejected some of it in return. And so now I'm glad that I'm slowly moving past it. Even if I still won't enjoy something from someone's music, at least I can look at it clearly before rejecting it. And I am in awe of all the work Beyonce is doing. And of course I did not avoid to spot a Yeah Yeah Yes reference in her song Hold Up, which warmed my heart because I was only half platonically in love with Karen O when I was 13 years old. Beyonce's work is intelligent, creative, nuanced, and it's probably not as easy as it looks to merge critical and relevant cultural work with mainstream appeal, and yet she keeps doing it. Will I listen to her music in my spare time? Probably not, except for Lemonade, of course, which I most likely will. But I am glad I did it because it certainly opened up my world somehow, and essentially that's what reading should do, right? And that's what music should do. So, happy birthday, Beyonce. I managed to turn my lemons into lemonade. I managed to overcome my years-long aversion to mainstream music and open my world. And I want to do that more. So, I consider this a disorderly success. And if you consider this video to be a success, then do stick around. Let me know whose shelves you'd like me to go through next. And I do also plan on reading the books of artists I actually listen to. Names that come to mind are Chris Cornell, Kurt Cobain, David Bowie. So give me names, any names you'd like to see. I'm open to anything, so open it's terrifying. And until then, make some lemonade, keep it sour enough, read some books, and I'll see you around. Stay disorderly? I want to say that, but it sounds contrived. Damn, that's sour.